Welcome back, you filthy exiles, and finally, after almost a year, we're bringing back the curations of 5 builds that you can consider at League Start. So, patch notes obviously came out today. If you're watching videos similar to this, they were released before the patch notes. Just be very scrupulous. Now, obviously, every build in this list I'm going to put on there's going to be some pretty significant changes. Most of these builds, if not all of them, whether or not you call them a league start or not, give you a really good idea of how to actually proceed through and build the build up from the very start to the very end. In the cases where an individual guide doesn't provide that, I've given you a series of links to the creators. If you're a creator and you don't want your video on this curation, please reach out to me and I'm more than happy to remove it. But otherwise, if you're happy for it to be on here, all the links will be in the description for everybody to click on and follow their way to the creators. Make sure you give them some love and like and sub to their channels as well. Now, basically, I've got a list here of relatively like safe-ish sort of builds. Obviously, there's things that will change dynamics for monk players right now, especially with how Grim Feast is being reworked. Essentially, you can't get it in the game until they actually totally rework it. Definitely things like Deadeye are relatively straightforward, and there's not too many things that will change about those builds. Crossbows got buffed, so I think it's a 20% flat buff across the board for crossbow damage, so crossbows are going to be a lot better. Warrior builds, in fact, got buffed. Things like Magma Barrier will be less effective. Are they going to be weak? Absolutely not. They're still going to be insanely strong. So while the changes might look really, really severe, it's balanced across the board, and also bearing in mind there's a large number of changes to enemies in the actual game, as well as health levels and things like that, and we've got new ascendancies and everything else to consider. So by no means are these absolutes that you should play. They will give you a good idea, and then you can take the trees and the information, what you learn from the builds, and you can apply them to your own build if you want to vary a build or whatnot. We're still very much in the early days and infancy of Path of Exile 2, where what is a league starter? We really don't fully know right now, not until the game sort of gets firmer in the position it takes around balance and where it wants to sit. But for right now, these build guides should give you a good idea of how to build these different types of archetypes. And if you haven't subbed to the channel already, make sure you drop a like and sub to the channel. There'll be more content like this coming out. If you like this type of curation format content, let me know below. And if you've got ideas for other builds you want to be featured in, like a part number 2 or something like that, more than happy to consider them. And yeah, anyway, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first build off the ranks is from the creator Ronarray. Now, this is like a crit strike lightning flurry invoker build on the monk. Obviously, this was one of the most popular builds when the game first shipped out and is still going to be very powerful. We'll run through in a moment the changes from the patches that will obviously have an impact on this build, but overall, from what I can see so far, the only real impacts in an endgame scale, if you're scaling ES on this build, for example, will be Grim Feast. This is when you switch to, for example, CI and ES. Now, Heralds are also changing with how Heralds work, so that may also have an impact on the build. But overall, for Ronarray's build, it has multiple videos, and I'll put a link to many of them in the description below. There's also a Mobalytics link which talks through absolutely everything that you need to know about the build. Now, ideally, you can use this to either adjust the build for your own purposes, or you could just get some ideas for how you could build this build, you know, even on another ascendancy of sort of similar nature, maybe like the Genuine Legionnaire or something of that nature, and then make some changes from there. But this is a really good guide just to explain the interactions between different skills and the way the skill tree is set up. So if you really want to play this particular guide, you can, but if you want to use this and learn from this, then Ronarray's already done all the research for you. Now, just in going through the patch notes, I noticed a number of changes that we'll talk about we'll talk about them now, in fact. Tempest Bell is getting nerfed pretty hard. Now, this was really, really strong on this particular build archetype, and there's another monk that I'll have in this list as well, which is also really good. But Tempest Bell is getting a bit of a whack. The overall damage is going up, but you're going to be able to cast it a lot less, which sucks, but also makes sense because it got heavily abused in the first release of the game. So yeah, they are sort of putting this in check a lot. The other thing also noted with it is it doesn't trigger as much, or it doesn't become available as much as what it previously used to. It's set on a timer almost. And the other thing is it also requires a lot more combinated hits to be able to trigger it. So it's now 10 hits at all gem levels, 10 hits as opposed to 4 hits. So you are going to have to combo more in order to activate it, but you're going to get a lot more damage out of it. So there is a bit of balance there. So it makes the monk less insane, But that being said, the monk is still going to be stupidly OP. The other thing is on-kill effects of heralds no longer stack or trigger from other herald skills now. So obviously this was off herald stacker setups and things like that, so it's a lot less powerful. But is it that much less powerful? Nah, Herald of Ice is probably still going to be totally abused in builds like this. Also, Wind Dancer grants less evasion than previous, so it went from 10%, it went to 10% from 15 to 19% originally. The advantage of this though is that every stage is going to gain quicker than what it did previously, so you're actually going to stack up Wind Dancer a lot faster than what you used to be, and also you get more damage out of Gale Force than you previously used to as well. So there is an advantage to a little bit less defense. As a result of that, you're going to get a little more damage, which makes sense for the most of it. Now, the Invoker Ascendancies did get tuned up a bit because Invoker was just insanely powerful. So the Lead Me Through Grace Note has been nerfed. And Protect Me from Harm Ascendancies also been nerfed. Also, Elemental Expression skills granted by the and Scatter them to the Winds Ascendancy now deals 40% more damage at all gem levels. So that's probably a buff from what I can see there. But overall, like, yep, these changes are nerfs and it did get hit, and some people will be like, oh, the build is dead, yada yada yada. Everybody says that every single league in Path of Exile 1, and most likely will be the case with 2, and the reality is the build will still work totally fine, and I would recommend this guide because it's really good and it's got a lot of information, perfect for new players as well. Okay, so for the next build that I'm going to recommend is from Fearless Dumb Zero. Now, I used to recommend his explosive trap builds as well because they were really good in Path of Exile 1. And the same deal here is with his gas grenade builds now for the Witch Hunter. Now, the Witch Hunter didn't really take off as one of the biggest archetypes, probably as GGG would have thought it would have. It only had 2% of player base playing it based on PoE2.ninja. And I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. So that website's fantastic for benchmarking and heat mapping. But that being said, this is a fantastic build guide. So obviously it's predicated on equipping gas grenade and then exploding gas grenades. Now, according to the patch notes, there was pretty big buffs across the board for example, crossbows got some love in this patch. So all crossbows across the board are getting a buff from what we can see, which is really good. I know Fearless Dub ended up having a ridiculous amount of like crossbow shoot speed, which was just totally nuts and blowing screens up and stuff like that. Now, the best thing about his guides, the Ascendancy also got some buffs as well for base damage and the conversion to ward for the Witch Hunter. Now, his guides have written guides in Mobalytics, and they cover from Acts 1, 2, and 3 into Endgame, and then the actual T15 Endgame itself. There's 2 videos, I'll put the links in the description. Overall, the build is really, really good. It's going to get better into the next league because it looks like the focus is to get people to play Witch Hunter a bit more because the player stats are down on that particular build archetype. It was abused early on, but I think like the novelty wore off. But yeah, if you were looking for something that was pretty damn solid, this is definitely a route to go. I'm also very aware that there were crossbow builds that were played on the Titan as well, which was quite effective and really good. So if you wanted to sort of look into those builds, you could also have a search for those, or you could try and apply this tree to that if you want to create your own build, but that's just a bit of an idea. But as a second build that you could sort of take and play from start to finish, this is definitely one that I would recommend from quite a good creator as well. Okay, so the next build I'm going to recommend is the Magma Barrier Warrior. Now, obviously, with the Smith coming out, that's only going to make this absolutely more ridiculous. It does rely on using a shield to basically proc Magma Barrier, and then you have a component called Magma Spray, which then explodes out. Now, using the item Trample Toes makes this significantly more powerful, and there's a reason why I'm recommending it, despite the fact that Magma Barrier got nerfed. The first reason is the tree I actually have from using a Titan for this, it gets up to 24.4 million DPS. So the decrease that's being put forward from GGG is totally irrelevant. The DPS of this is still going to be absurdly ridiculous. Now, that being said, they're making changes to attributes and things like ingenuity and things like that, which will all drop the damage, but it's still going to be really powerful. It's still going to be well over 2 to 5 million DPS, well in that like 10 million range, estimated, something like that. So, and with all the new things that are being added to the game and the more tankability from the Smith class itself, or the Smith Ascendancy, sorry, it's going to be probably a lot more powerful. Well, not a lot more powerful, but it's still going to be really powerful. So I'm going to recommend this either way. The other big thing here is the actual Trample Toes themselves. While people thought they were going to get nerfed, And the reason why they're strong is because of the AoE from the overkill damage that comes from them. When I searched the patch notes, they hadn't done anything with Trampled Toes. So Trampled Toes is still going to be as strong as it previously was. It's really only going to be the Magma Spray that's going to be decreased. And its total high cap damage goes from 490% increased damage to 405% increased damage. And the real beauty of this skill is its increased damage really is when it scales out in gem level, and it has like this ridiculous exponential damage scaler that, you know, gets to the point where you can just totally blow up entire screens. Now, they also did change the health of Shield Wall as well. That was one of the things that was used in Synergy to essentially make this one-hit bosses, and it's just a case where you're probably not going to be able to one-hit bosses. You're still going to be able to totally terminate bosses, though, irrespective of that. And so this is probably a pretty safe build to recommend. Like, leveling it up a tree, and I have a tree that I'll release in the next day or so for a level up to get to like the tankability of this type of build, really puts the warrior in almost the top spot for just being able to totally face tank damage. And this build is really cool for that reason. Like, personally, I've been playing around with a Titan tree for this, and I've actually had a lot of fun playing the warrior and leveling up a warrior. And I definitely would recommend this. This was actually quite a brilliant build and highly defensive. Basically, totally is baked on defense. And the other big advantage is they've made a big change to shield skills in their own right for raised shield. And it now does a shield bash, which now procs a stun or a daze, which will most likely be something that we can then abuse with this configuration as well, for when you block a skill with shield bash and then essentially, you know, daze the enemy and then do, you know, have support gems that increase the amount of damage that the enemy takes at the end of the day. So that to me seems like this build would still be extremely, you know, up there as one of the stronger warrior builds that are out there. Now, just on what the creators have actually done here with Lex and the Doppelganker. Doppelganker actually came up with the Trample Toes idea, and Lex did the guides. Now, the guides are actually pretty well put together, and all their links will be in the description for you to follow. And they're very well articulated. There's a lot of like detail in how the build is constructed and breaking down the damage and everything else from that. So I would definitely recommend their channels. Pop by the channels and give them both a sub and a like. They'll probably come up with some really cool stuff this league as well, with or this patch, with all the changes that are coming into the game. Okay, so the next one is I guess like, well, quite frankly, a really popular monk build and quite strong as well. It's the Ice Strike Invoker. Now, this one is put together by Everseen, and I've rated his channel a number of times on Twitch, I believe. But yeah, check out his channel. It's actually pretty good, and his Switch and whatnot. But anyway, as far as the guide goes itself, it's quite comprehensive, especially well made for new players. There are POB links in these updated guides as well, so they're pretty good. They're of recent, actually. And yeah, overall, there are 3 in particular guides for this. I won't go into detail about what Ice Strike Monk is. Essentially, it is Ice Strike, and then basically you scale it with Herald of Ice. Now, there obviously were nerfs to Herald of Ice and things like that that we'll have to, you know, work around and come up with solutions to. But the fundamentals for this build are there, and it should still be quite powerful, just not as powerful as what it previously was. But that being said, the guides stem from a fresh leveling guide for new Invoker and Monk players, in particular, through to, I guess, build update number 1, and then an overall endgame build as well, which you will be able to see all the links in the description to. Overall, it's just a really solid build. If you're confused as to what you want to play and you don't really want to play the new Ascendancies or anything like that, you just want to play something that works, that you have a bit of a good idea that you won't get bottlenecked with some sort of bait build or something of that nature, then this is probably a really good build for you. So for build number 5, which will be the final build of this list, it's from Scorpius, and this is the Lightning Arrow Deadeye. Now, according to the patch notes, Deadeye just really did not get hit at all with the nerf hammer as far as the Ascendancy goes, and as far as Lightning Arrow, I couldn't see anything in the actual patch notes which attacked this. Now, the other beauty of this build, I guess, and just a bit of a synopsis, so basically you drop Lightning Rod, and then you basically hit with arrows, and you just blow everything up. This is just a really reliable build. Like, overall, Deadeye builds, as by default nature, whether you play them as like Gallad staff builds and stuff like that, are quite powerful. Part of that is because of Tailwind and the Tailwind stack up, which just makes you insanely strong with projectiles chaining everywhere and whatnot. But for the most, Lightning Arrow builds are just really, really good at just blasting through games. And also, Lightning Arrow players are something of a very different nature. I've met a few in real life, and they're a little crazy. But anyway, this is just a really solid build guide. Now, there are 2 links in the description below for this. So number 1 will take you from level 1 to 65 and give you all the information you need to be able to do that, with a max roll link as well. And the second one will be the end game crit guide, which will take you through all the end game ins and outs for how to make this build tick. Now, one of the really good things about this particular setup is if you want to play, for example, a Javazon or something of similar of nature with the new ascendancy, you could retrofit this POB and be able to achieve that. That would totally be something that you could potentially do, you know, as an option with this type of guide, which is why I wanted to link it. You might be able to apply it to the use on the Huntress, for example. Anyway, just another really good guide, something relatively solid that you'll be able to apply. Obviously, there will be things in the patch notes that will affect this build, but for the most, this should still be a pretty, you know, viable and totally playable build that you'll be able to take all the way through to endgame in Path of Exile 2. Alright, so hopefully these builds will give you a bit of an idea of what you could play in the 020 patch or league that's coming out in the next few days. Obviously, these will be all subject to some certain level of change, but they're more like a bit of an idea of what you could play from start to finish, which is why I've chosen specific guides that give you leveling sequences and everything else that you need to know. Now, where are my guides? Well, I didn't really get into guide making in the last, I guess, release, because I wanted to make sure that I knew the game well enough before then, and I hadn't been as focused. But moving forwards with all the patch changes, really happy with the direction of Path of Exile 2. It's definitely moving in the direction of a Path of Exile game that I would want to play into the future. So yeah, they're coming and they're on their way. But anyway, until then, I'll see you guys later. And also don't forget to like and sub to the channel, and have a good one.